We have with us Professor Keith Smith from the University of the Pacific in Stockton, and we'll eventually be joined at a point by Matt Klink as well. Everyone's schedule has been thrown around today. As we were talking about before we started recording, we're going to start this conversation about the governor's race. We have the newest candidate that jumps in. It's former HHS Secretary for former California Attorney General Xavier Becerra. What do we know about this candidate? He seems like quite an interesting person to come into this race with both the experience of Attorney General in California, then also a cabinet secretary in the United States.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of the next logical opportunity for him. The Senate contest is not going to be an open contest for quite some time. And with the change in administration, he was out of a job at the national level. And so, if you are an ambitious politician, and he clearly is an ambitious politician, then you take the next available thing, and that happens to be the governor's race here, or the governor's position here in California. So he's already run a major statewide contest. Won it pretty handily when he last ran for attorney general. And so he's got some experience in running statewide campaigns that will serve him well here.
I don't mean this to be a off-putting remark towards him or other people that are in this race, but three of the main candidates that are here are going to be Katie Porter, Antonio Villaraigosa, and him, Javier
Mm-hmm.
Becerra, that are all out of office. And I don't mean this to be a bad comparison, but is he more well known for his time as Attorney General or the guy who got replaced by RFK Jr.?
Uh, so I honestly don't think that matters a whole lot. I think the fact that he has run a statewide campaign and been successful previously is the important factor here. So he's built the networks within the California Democratic Party, and he was able to convince enough people across the state to vote for him in his prior contest, so that he was able to win. Now, it is, if you are a major Democratic politician here in the state of California and you're looking around for a way to still be influential, to try and influence what happens in the state or to try and influence what happens on the national stage, right? The really big opportunity at this point is the governor's contest, because Gavin Newsom is term limited out, right? And so there's an open seat that's going to be available.
And I just want to say, whenever we say Gavin Newsom, Matt Klink appears to talk about him as well. So Matt, we're already
Gavin Newsom.
exactly. Well, we already started recording, but we were just going to jump in with the governor's race and just talk about the Javier Becerra announcement. I mean, that's a interesting one because, as Keith was laying out there, he's the only person of these. I guess you can call it a big four group of candidates if you include him, Antonio Villaraigosa, Katie Porter, and Chad Bianco. That's one statewide office before in this state.
Yeah, I mean, look, uh, the challenge that Javier Becerra, he's been around in politics for a very, very long time. Yeah, he's won statewide, but he's also run for governor before and run very badly for governor before. So I think that it will be a long shot for him. Look, that the challenge is to finish first or second, and I think that right now the elephant in the room is what's Kamala going to do, because she would certainly finish first or second, and then it's a race for that second spot. And if the Republicans get a credible candidate, and I do not think that Sheriff Chad Bianco is that candidate, then I think that they will likely make the runoff, and then the Democrat has a pretty easy ride to the general election. What really needs to happen is that we need to get a progressive Democrat and a more centrist Democrat to run so that the Republicans don't feel disenfranchised. But typically that doesn't happen in California.
Well, when we think about Sheriff Chad Bianco as well, I think he's an exceptional Republican candidate that we'll have in studio for an interview in early May.
Oh, you
We're
should. You should. He is good. I mean, look, he is right now the only Republican candidate. I don't think that will be the case for long, though.
And I think, Professor, the thing that a lot of Democrats, I imagine, would have difficulties with the sheriff on would be number one, he wears his uniform to a lot of different interviews. He's very hardline compared to other sheriffs in maybe some of those more Democratic counties when you think about the way he does law enforcement in the state. But at the same time, too, the propositions were that he was supporting this past election were very successful in far as getting that across the line. Do you think that what he was able to do is kind of being a bit of a figure for what that Prop 36 looked like across the state helps him at all in this race? Does it make him a legitimate candidate to actually contend, not just finish top two?
I think there's a lot that's going to go into whether or not the California electorate views him as a legitimate candidate. I mean, for most people in the state of California, they haven't even heard of him yet. They have no idea who he is, and so a lot of work has to be done in order to kind of familiarize him with voters across the state and to get people to pay attention. The wearing of the uniform. I don't know that that's particularly a thing, other than people who are in that kind of role like to wear the uniform. They serve in that role proudly, and they want to have people understand that they are in fact law enforcement. But other sheriffs have done similar. I'm forgetting the guy's name up here in Sacramento, who was the sheriff for Sacramento County and was quite conservative and did a lot of things kind of counter the state government and the governor here in Sacramento. So it's a well-worn path. I just don't know that at this point it's going to lead anywhere. Or I'll say there's a lot of work that has to be done yet.
Right. Yeah, and as we've always noted when we've had these conversations, we're in April of 25. That primary is not till, I believe, June of 26. So we still have quite a lot of time to go for there. Okay, so for the main topic of today, we'll discuss this LCFS, low carbon fuel standard tax that would be that there's limited time left to prevent it from really taking full effect in May. And I think the line I would imagine that many Republicans have on this, Matt, is that you have Democrats nationally knocking the tariffs, the big announcements from today. But at the same time, too, when there's a chance in the state to prevent costs from being passed on to consumers on a very essential product being gas, they're not taking the opportunity to prevent that from happening.
Will, you're absolutely right. And the even bigger challenge is that wasn't it Speaker Rivas and Senate Majority Leader McGuire that spent so long talking about the affordability crisis in California? Yet it seems that, for the Democrats in Sacramento, their idea of affordability is the government coming in and telling you as a private sector how much you should charge for a product, and then doing everything you can to create a regulatory environment that makes it more expensive to operate. And case in point is what has happened with the oil and gas industry in California is we have gone out of our way to create an environment where there is less gas that nobody else in the United States uses. We import more than 70% of our gas, and we do so in an environment that's high taxes. And then the politicians throw up their hands and say, why does our gasoline cost so much? It must be the greedy companies are gouging us. Well, they've looked at that and they're not. The reason why gas costs so much is because of everything that I stated before. And, heaven forbid that we lose another oil refinery in the state. And then the geniuses at the California Energy Department or Energy Commission, whatever the name is, you know what their solution is? That the state will take over and run a refinery. Ooh, you want to be scared about something that government should have no business doing? Do you really trust a government bureaucrat to run an oil refinery? I mean, it boggles my mind when they wonder why the system is broken and that Californians pay more for gasoline and they don't blame themselves.
And Professor Smith, I go to you on that because I think the big question really is from Democrats is going to be: are there enough Democrats like State Senator Melissa Hurtado, who's here in the Central Valley, who has already voted against, or excuse me, voted for the repeal of this? Are there going to be enough other Democrats to join in? Because when that vote was taken in committee, a number of Democrats voted as not voting.
Yeah, I think it's a hard vote for Democrats to make because essentially you have kind of environmental concerns on one hand and cost of living on the other. And this is one of those places where the trade-offs between two very important priorities for the Democratic Party are in absolute conflict with each other. That if you really believe that climate change is a problem that ought to be addressed and that government ought to do everything it can to deal with that, then this kind of policy is what you want. But on the flip side, if you are there to serve your constituents to make their lives better on a day-to-day basis, then doing things that make it more expensive to live here in the state of California is a big problem. So you have two really important parts of kind of Democratic priorities coming into heavy conflict with each other. So it's not at all surprising that people are choosing to vote present or not vote rather than staking out a position and being associated with one or the other.
In Fresno, this was last year. The governor had essentially raised his voice and yelled at one of our sister stations of reporters up at Fox 26 in Fresno about, look what's going to happen at the start of next year. Talk to me again at the start of next year with the oil price and the gas prices. Well, now here in April, we're seeing that those prices are coming back up. And not only that, we're going to be switching into those more expensive fuel blends that'll be coming this year. Matt, your thoughts on that? I mean, I know that he was very defiant at the time. I don't know if he's wanting to have those same conversations, both in person or on his podcast.
Oh, Will, in the religion of climate change, the heresy is to talk about, the need for petroleum, irrespective of the hard reality that we need. I mean, everything we use has some petroleum, or most things we use, not everything, most things we use has some petroleum in it. The lunacy of California being, not being able to sell, internal combustion engine cars by what's the date, 2030 or 2035? I mean, give me a break. Talk about the blind leading the blind. It just is and yet they make decisions based on all of these that, I mean, imagine if you're a gardener and you live in a suburb that you have to drive into the city to do your work. You can't afford to buy an electric car. Oh, and by the way, talk about electric cars. You have the one person in the world who has produced a product that everybody wants, and he is now the devil incarnate because of what he's doing on the national level, irrespective of the fact that he had a factory in California. He was making cars here. They were electric cars, and they're cars that people want to buy. He's not losing money on them like the American manufacturers are that produce electric cars. But again, the religion of party ideology determines that he is now bad and Teslas are now, the car we cannot talk about. I mean, this is how stupid it is. Yet Californians need to go on and live life. I mean, look at energy prices. Not even gasoline. Look at, prices of electricity in homes. They're continuing to go up, squeezing people again, making it not affordable. If you raise the price of those inputs, guess what? Everything else that you buy costs more. But apparently the Democrats in Sacramento, they didn't take economics. Maybe they studied at Moscow State University, but they're not making common sense decisions. And the only reason why California has prospered is because the tech market in Northern California has done well. When the tech market doesn't do well, or if stock prices at Nvidia and Apple and Google are down, the state is going to hurt. And guess what? Right now, it's going to hurt really bad. So, I mean, this is not even a political discussion. This is a fundamental economics conversation. And it's a question of making, ideological decisions without having real facts that you're looking at.
And you mean University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho? Is that what you were talking about? Or are you
No,
talking
I'm
about?
talking about the original MSU, Moscow State University.
Gotcha. Um, well, Professor Smith, I think to go to you on this topic, the governor his big stand so far on his podcast has seeming to be, well, yeah, I think there's maybe two. The one is the concession of affordability and housing in the state. And then the second has been the trans athletes in sports. Those seem to be the two where he's maybe wanting to move a little bit different. Is this a third window of opportunity for him to say, you know what? I've heard enough at this point. We've gotten it wrong. Or maybe he doesn't like admitting that he's wrong, so he'll find some other way to say it and get away from it. Is this an opportunity for him especially when it comes to the same day where we're seeing these 10% tariffs stacked on from the Trump administration?
So I think the kind of conversations that the governor is having on his podcast are part of the broader conversation that the Democratic Party is having amongst itself at this moment, having lost the presidential election, having failed to win back the House, looking forward at a really tough Senate map in 2026, and trying to figure out a way to begin appealing to a whole set of voters that seem unconvinced that the Democratic Party has anything to offer them, and continuing with the same way of talking about the world, the same approach to policy making, for a lot of people inside the Democratic Party is folly at this moment. And so Newsom over time has demonstrated that he's an incredibly skilled politician. And so if this is an opportunity to kind of reorient, rethink, and represent some ideas, then, and that's good politics, then he will go ahead and do that in this moment. So, the other thing is, he came into office saying we need to build more housing. He tried for a number of ways to get more housing built. It's hard in Sacramento to get anything passed because of kind of this accumulation of interest that the Democratic Party represents, labor, environmentalists, all kinds of things that local control that make building hard and expensive here in the state of California, never mind the cost of the building materials. But it hasn't happened. And so that's still I would say that part of it is still part of something that he came in wanting to change, wanting to affect, but was unable to in his time here.
So speaking about building materials, I know one of the things that might be very difficult nowadays will be the tariffs that will be coming down, this 10%, it seems like flat tariff on countries around the world that extends to higher percentages for countries that are considered worse actors around the world when it comes to importing products. I think the place to start with that is how can Republicans kind of square that discussion around, okay, this is actually better for the country? It's almost like a reverse of 1972 for the history lessons, I think, or maybe before that with Nixon's price controls that administration had, which helped avoid a recession in the short term, but in the long term ended up maybe leading towards the Carter recession. This sounds like it's the reverse of that, where pain's coming early, but the selling point is in the future, America will have more freedom and economic independence. Professor, is that a good place to start with that?
so I mean, is the question, how do Republicans talk about this in this moment? I think you can see right now that Republicans are having a hard time talking about this in this moment because it cuts across so many different aspects, and the messaging out of the White House has been inconsistent as to what the purpose of this is, right? Is it to reinvigorate manufacturing within the United States? Okay, fine. Is it to raise revenue for the federal government in the face of other tax cut or to offset other tax cuts? Okay, fine. Those two goals work against each other. Is it to reassert American dominance in other areas? Okay, well, maybe that's compatible with either of the first two goals, but there hasn't been a consistent message about what is going on. And it may be that the White House really wants to achieve, use it for all three. And so that's why we don't have a consistent message, but it does, everybody at this point, consumers, businesses are expecting prices to go up. And that was the main complaint of, going into the 2024 election. That was the main finding in the kind of post-analysis of 2024 was that people were upset about the cost of living and wanted government to do something to address the high cost of living. Now, I do think, I have no idea what's going to happen with the tariffs. I have no idea and I don't think anybody really has a good understanding of what's going to happen going forward. We're all in a wait and see mode, right? My economist friends say pain's coming. I don't know. Um, we're in uncharted waters here, so it's hard to
Yeah.
talk about the future when you don't know what's coming.
Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that Professor, the most accurate and telling statement is that what you said is that nobody ultimately knows what's coming. You can, my I'd give my kingdom for a one-handed economist because they always say on the other hand. And I think, look, the challenge here is that what Donald Trump is hopes to use tariffs for multiple things. One is to correct imbalances that have occurred over time. So, for example, Vermont butter is taxed 230 plus percent by the Canadians because they don't want Vermont butter coming into Canada. Well, guess what? That's not fair to Vermont farmers. That's a place where we should raise tariffs and say, lower yours, we'll lower ours. We've made some stupid trade deals over the past. There are other things for bad actors that will be punished. And I think that India is an example here where they have high tariffs on certain things that we don't think are fair. Well, guess what? If we raise tariffs, either India can say we're going to counter back, in which case it'll be tit for tat, and then everybody will lose, or they could do what Israel did. Israel preemptively lowered tariffs on goods because they didn't want to be caught up in Donald Trump's, tariff threats. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that are going to happen. Some countries will push back. I heard the EU is going to push back. And guess what? It's the EU. Their economy is weak. Our economy is even if the American economy isn't as strong, they're still stronger than anybody else. So I don't think that, in a definition of pain, it depends. Look, interest rates are coming down, which means that money will be more affordable. So long as the Fed doesn't inject more cash into the economy, I think that that's a good thing. And I mean, put it this way, government spending, and I know we're kind of off, I've got us off topic here. Government, if we, with the money we collected last year, it would have balanced the budget in 2018. The problem is that government spending has skyrocketed. And if we can slow that government spending, and one way to do that is to get rid of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., then that's a good thing. Then we're right sizing the economy. And I think a lot of with Trump and these tariffs, it's a negotiating tactic. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are pulled down. Some countries aren't going to want to pick a fight. Others will get into a trade war. But guess what? America can weather that storm. So again, I think that the professor ultimately is right, though. No one ultimately knows. And the lesson from 2024 is people don't want to pay more, but Americans have also become addicted to cheap goods from China that are made by slave labor. They don't cost anything. And I think that we need to get off of that. And if the pandemic showed us anything, we got to start making important things in the US again, like penicillin and like producing more domestic steel. So, long-winded answer, confusing answer, but
No, I think it's an answer that covered just about everything. I think the overall question will be, as you mentioned, it could have balanced the budget in 2018. The president, Trump, was president for those next couple of years after that. So it's a matter of whether or not it's taken him at his word when it comes to this issue, whether or not he wants to continue to follow what he had set out. Yeah, Matt.
and by the way, no party has distinguished themselves on cutting the deficit. Both parties are addicted to government spending, and I think that ultimately is a problem. And one way around that is to shrink the number of people who are in Washington, D.C. that are available to spend that money.
And that's a good point. And one last thing I wanted to talk about, just with you, the professor, being up there in Sacramento. This is something we've been following along. A lot of political reporters around the state that don't happen to be up there has been a lot of silence that's come from leadership in Sacramento, specifically from Speaker Rivas. He's avoided interviews for these last 3 months, hasn't been taking these one-on-ones, has been running away from press. It's been quite an interesting scene to see. We've had reporters from several different stations, not just the ones that we're affiliated with, trying to track him down and have a conversation with him. Um, when you have these big issues like the ones that we were talking about earlier, such as the LCFS one that has an effect on affordability on a day to day, we look at other things like rent controls, whatever it is that relates to affordability, and people want answers on as to why things are happening a certain way. Is this a good strategy from California Democrats in that representation inside the state Senate, inside the state Assembly, to not be taking as many answers and media requests as their Republican colleagues do? Because then it just seems it drives all the attention, because then the conservative outlets pick it up, drives all this attention to California as an example for what not to be, and that hurts Democrats' image nationwide.
I think it's again an outcome of the cross pressures that Democratic politicians are feeling in the state of California, that the constellation of interests, the constellation of groups that have traditionally supported the Democratic Party have policies that increasingly, or have policy preferences that are increasingly at conflict with each other. And so if you stake out a position in favor of one policy, you're going to alienate another part of what has been your core constituency. And in that instance, it's better just not to say anything, to avoid taking a position, so that you don't satisfy anybody, but you don't tick anybody off either, because you haven't said something against what they're arguing for. I also think that it's part of the kind of soul searching that the Democratic Party is going through. They don't really have a good strategy yet to counter the messaging that Trump has been made and his White House have been putting out there. They don't have a good response yet. They don't have a good strategy for what to do in the face of all of the things that have been happening coming out of Washington, D.C. And so, the speaker in the California State Assembly is not going to be the national spokesperson for the Democratic Party, even as much as we might want somebody in California to take on that role, being one of the kind of big Democratic states in the country. And so, is it problematic that the press is having a hard time cornering him and getting some answers? Yeah. On the other hand, I think it's perfectly understandable that he doesn't particularly want to put himself out there and say things at this moment, because doing so would start to anger a lot of the people that he needs here in the state of California.
Well, there's also a tremendous arrogance of power. I mean, look, this is the Democrats have super majorities in both houses of the legislature. They control everything. I mean, the arrogance starts when the speaker kicks the minority party, the two or three of the loudest people on committees, for calling into question some of the Democratic majority's policies, when he throws them off committees because they're asking the wrong questions or asking the tough questions. And the speaker won't talk to a press corps that is largely progressive and in line with the policies that the Democrats in Sacramento, even though they're out of touch nationally, their majority plus policies in California. I just don't want its arrogance that, why do I have to worry? We're not going anywhere. But two, it just goes to show you how thin that the Democratic policy agenda is, that they're not even capable or willing to answer fundamental questions about what you're doing and why it's important and how it's impacting people's lives. That's kind of a fundamental chore of government. And again, it's complete arrogance of power, and it's what you have when one party controls government. And in California, it's the Democratic Party. It's what happens when one party controls government for so long that they don't care what people think. And they don't want anybody to question them because they think that they know better. So I'll say shame on the speaker. The voters deserve better.
Well, thank you both for joining me today. Appreciate it. We covered a wide range of different topics there, which was glad to do so. And yeah, we look forward to having you both on again. And as this spring continues to spring, we have several different governor candidates that I'm sure will be popping out on a weekly basis. And we look forward to keeping you up to date with every single one of them. And of course, this vote to see what happens before May, if this LCFS gets passed or not. So thank you so much. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
See you, Professor.